Hello, it's Kathy. Welcome to the second installment of Tarot in the Wild, where I answer your question, what do people ask when they come to a tarot reading, and how can tarot address those questions? So today we're talking about the question, should I quit my job? This one comes in a variety of flavors. So I've broken it down into three basic categories based on kind of where you are in your thought process around this question. So the first category is probably the most common, and that is somebody who's been debating about quitting for at least a little while, and they have maybe one or two options that they've been considering around what to do next, but they're still not fully sure it's actually a good idea to quit. They're kind of testing the waters. So in terms of potential moves that they're thinking of, maybe they generally like their job, but they hate their boss, or there's been downsizing and now there's a lot of extra work with the same pay, or, so they basically want the same job, but in a new environment. Or maybe they want to take this opportunity to try something new, like something they've been wanting to do for a while, but maybe didn't want to rock the boat. But if they're going to quit anyhow, they're already rocking the boat, why not give it a try? Right? So what I do here is I ask the cards to show us how each of your options would play out. How will it go if you don't quit? What if you stay in your job? What's that going to look like? How will it go if you make that move to another company or your new idea or whatever it is you're focused on? And if you do have a couple of main options that you're working on, we can look at how each of those will play out. And then we look at the cards. Excuse me, we compare and contrast, like the pros and cons of each situation. Usually that first pile of how will it go if you stay is going to show you more of the same. It's going to show you what you already know about your job. There's often like a stability factor in there because you know what to expect. You have that job. They're already paying you. But then you compare that to your other options, right? Like how do the other ones look? Is it something you're going to love? Is it going to be really hard? Is there more freedom? Is there more structure? Is it going to take a really long time to get that job? And so when you do these comparisons, sometimes there's an obvious choice like, oh, this is really working out and this is absolutely making me miserable. And so then it's just very obvious. But sometimes it's not as clear. There's pros and cons to everything. And so then we really look specifically, drill down into what the specific differences are and which differences are more important to you, And if it's still not clear, we can ask for advice just specifically. How can we make this choice, right? Or if maybe there's a better option that you haven't been thinking of yet that we can look at. Okay, so that's the first category. The second category often presents as should I quit my job, but these people actually have already made that decision. They are 100% going to quit their job. It doesn't really matter what comes out in the reading. They're ready to go. So they're not really looking for advice on quitting, but maybe they're not ready to do it because they're nervous about what happens next. Like they're not ready to take that plunge because they still feel unsettled about like what direction should they go? What steps should they take, right? So they need information about their options to relieve some doubts. So, and these people often have really thought about this and they know, like there's option A, there's option B, sometimes a C. So the question becomes which of these moves that they're considering is going to bring them the most personal and financial satisfaction, really. So which move is most aligned, right? So maybe they're looking at a lateral move within the company or jumping to a similar job somewhere else, or maybe they have a different type of job they want to try, or they have this business idea they want to run with. People usually have like 2 to 3 ideas that they're really seriously considering. So in this case, we use a similar technique to that first category where we pull cards on each of the options they're looking at. But this time we don't have a pile for staying in the job because they've already ruled that out, right? And again, we compare and contrast the pros and cons of each. Sometimes there's an obvious, clear winner. Sometimes it's more subtle. And if it is more subtle, we look, drill down into exactly how they differ and which of these differences is more important to whoever's asking the question. And again, we can always ask on advice on how to choose. The third category is someone who is at the very beginning of this process. They've maybe just recently realized that they really want to quit their job, but they haven't had time to give any thought to what that would look like. They're usually very frustrated, often angry, right? Something happened and they're like, I'm done. They want to quit, but it's truly terrifying, right? They have no idea what that would look like after they quit. And this is important. They don't even know what they would want that to look like. Like, what are they looking for? They don't know. They haven't gone through that thought process yet. So there are 2 steps to what I do in this situation. First, we're just going to ask, what is going on, right? We'll use a Celtic cross spread, see what is this person actually facing in their job right now? Where is it coming from? Is this a permanent thing? Is this some transitory problem? Where is it headed? Is there anything they can do to alleviate the problem within the job that would make them feel satisfied again? Or maybe this is truly irreconcilable and they need to move on, right? So seeing the cards laid out in this way, describing your situation, that often makes it easier to see it from a more objective position, right? It lets you focus on specific aspects of the situation, just this separately, and then see how they all interact instead of having everything come into your brain all at once and be like, it really helps you organize your thoughts, right? So depending on how this initial part goes, you might have a better idea about whether or not you actually need to quit. So let's say there's nothing you can do and you really do need to quit. So in that case, we move on to helping them start thinking clearly about what their options could be, right? Like, what do they want in a job? What would be fulfilling to them personally, financially? Like, what's important to them? What do they need? So unlike the other 2 categories, we don't have something to compare and contrast yet. They're just not at that stage yet. So I'll generally start by asking the cards to show us what kind of job qualities would be a good fit for this person, and then discuss what comes up. Like, it becomes a brainstorming session. So maybe it looks like they'd be good on a team. Like, do they enjoy working on a team, or do they really like to work separately on their own? Do they need structure? Do they thrive in that kind of environment? Or are they better maybe with a free-flowing kind of situation? What are their skills? What do they love to do, right? Like, do they want to do some kind of service? And if they do they want to do one-on-one service, or is this something they want to do, maybe group coaching or something like that? Are they creative? Do they need to have the ability to put their own personal flair on whatever they're working on? Do they love figuring things out, solving puzzles, working with animals, whatever it is? Like, maybe they would do best in the exact job that they're doing now. They just need a different environment. So we just see what comes up, brainstorm about the type of job that they would like to do after they quit. We get ideas like, what lights them up? What do they want to do? What kind of jobs would pay them to do that? So this starts helping them think clearly about, what do they want to do? What options are there? What types of jobs are they interested in? And depending on how this goes, they can then start thinking about what needs to happen before they quit, right? Can they go home and start applying to job postings right away? Do they need to get a certificate or some other kind of training before they can apply? Do they need to go back to school? And if that is the case, is that something they're interested in doing? Is that something that just makes that option completely off the table? A lot of people are not willing or able to go back to school, right? So then we move on to plan B. So all of this is usually enough to think on for one day, right? So they can go home, Really think that through. What do I actually want to do? What's available? What kind of options am I really looking for? What's important to me? And then once they've settled on options, they can come back and do, like, we can look at them, compare and contrast, like I was talking about with the other categories, right? Like we discussed earlier. And in all of these cases, once we figured out the best move, we can then look at how to land that job, right? Get good advice on what would make that the most effective. But unless you've booked a really long session, that's usually done on another day, right? And it's a different question. So we will tackle that one in another video. If you would like to book a reading with me, you can book online at forestempress.com. I do in-person readings in and around Cleveland, in Shaker Heights, Tremont. I do online readings from anywhere over Zoom. I'll put a link in the description. Let me know what you think in the comments. Bye.